Hey, thank you everyone for joining our 12th Omnibus webinar for 2025. So really excited about that. We've got some great presenters. Basically, the Omnibus today has 4 sessions, and great pleasure in having 8 very, very knowledgeable and panelists of great expertise. The first panel is rewriting the organizational learning code. So love to have Michael talk about what they're doing at Anglicare, but would like to acknowledge that Michael's been involved in Learning Cafe pretty much from the first meeting, I think 13 years ago. So Michael, thank you very much for your support and your continuous participation in Learning Cafe and especially in version 2. We also have Sandhya all the way from Perth, from RAC. So welcome, Sandhya, and we look forward to both these panelists sharing more about how they're changing things at the organizational level to accommodate the new ways of learning. Next, we kind of move in more into the design and delivery. So we've got Tracy, whom I'm known from QBE days. I've kind of worked with Tracy before, a great enthusiast of using AI, an active experimenter. So really great to have Tracy, and I think she's going to show you a few things which will be really exciting. Then a long-term associate, Mike, who has participated in the webinars before and all the way from Florida. So Mike, thank you very much. Mike's got a big brain, so really looking forward to hearing him talk about this shift that's happening in the future of work. And then again, a long time met Rob Wilkins. Rob and I worked with St. George before it was part of Westpac, and be a very active part of Learning Cafe. So welcome, Rob. And in tandem with Helena, Helena has got some really exciting things to talk, and I'm really looking forward to that session because they've got a new structure for that. So welcome. And then finally, we also have myself just kind of covering a little bit of the signpost for our profession. And then also Catherine. Catherine and I work together at Blackmores. And Catherine actually I asked her to talk about how do you make the decisions about major skill sets or career changes. So she's going to share with us about, how do you exactly make up your mind when and how to make career and skill changes. So that's the panel. I very quickly about the new version of Learning Cafe version 2. The working hypothesis here is that we are only thinking about post-adoption AI. So we recognize or we know that AI is an inevitable force. This shift, which at the moment is uneven and disruptive, demands immediate and strategic action from our profession to stay relevant and deliver value. But to stay relevant, we must actually be pretty proactive, probably more than ever before, just because this force of AI will shape things if we don't participate in how we are shaped. So that will include changes to our core skills and methodologies. So our strategic lens is that we acknowledge that AI is actually better at some tasks than humans and vice versa. So humans will be better than AI, but that equation keeps changing and it needs tracking. We need to redefine L&D's value proposition. We'll cover this a little bit more, but I think there's an urgent call to action on that. And we need to kind of build AI skills just beyond the superficial understanding of prompt engineering, right? And conversely, I think we need to strengthen and go back to our roots of in-person and facilitation skills. So that's kind of a strategic lens. It's our hypothesis and lens. What we've got coming up next year, I won't go into great details because there is a link I'll send you where you can register your interest for all these events. But very, very, very excited to announce the L&D Geek Out, which will be a Zoomcast edition of about 20 professionals with hands-on experience in using AI in L&D, but also deep AI tech experience. I've already got Mike, Tracy, Morgan, and Tom signed up for this. So there'll be 3 people talking about what they've done with AI, especially in learning over the past fortnight. So that'll be, I think, pretty exciting. We also will have open source projects. 2 of them you can see there. Also running workshops, very, very hands-on, case study based, etc. And also happy to announce that Michael is hosting our first Macquarie Park meetup, and there will be others in Sydney, CBD, Melbourne, and Brisbane in 2026. but it's February 5th and to be hosted by Michael. So looking forward to that. And I think the unconference will also be back at some point in time. Okay, so the question we asked was, what should L&D professionals prioritize more in 2026? 61.63% said they need to service strategic business partners and advisors. I think we probably need to discuss, but I think that ship has sailed, or it's not as relevant anymore, just because AI is starting to fill some of those gaps. But certainly, the focus on becoming more agile facilitators, which is 11.61, probably needs a little bit re-examination. In terms of the temperature gauge, the question that we asked was, how do you feel about the next year? And we were a very optimistic bunch. And we said that 26 is going to be better than 25. And 23% said that it will be dramatically different. So very interesting times ahead for us in 26. So get some rest over the Christmas break. The two questions about AI that we asked was, one was about generative AI. 1/3 said that it can be used to enhance learner engagement, and we've got Mike and Tracy will be talking about that, plus also in some of the other material that we have in the presentation. The other third said automating content creation for faster and more personalized learning materials. We'll talk about that, and automating L&D tasks. And finally, agentic AI, 20% didn't know much about it, and 38%, 40% said, medium to uneven impact next year. So some interesting stats, which we will refer to as we go along. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over the presentation to Michael. So Michael, over to you.
Cool. So what we want to talk about is really where we're rethinking this organizational learning to keep pace with AI. I think it's going to be our challenge going forward, and some of the other panelists are going to talk about that as well. AI is moving at a pace faster than probably what we've seen in the past, if anything else. So roll on to the next slide. We really want to look at the whole concept and the challenge. Traditional organizational learning hasn't really changed, and I was just talking to Jevan before. I pulled some slides up from 2012 when we did one of the first Learning Cafe pieces, and the reality is that it hasn't really changed. Traditional organizational learning models and frameworks tend to be rigid, slow to update, and that creates a lag in skill development. I'm going to click Jevan. There's a couple more points on that slide as well. So we might be using different approaches, online learning, virtual classrooms, but the model and the model methodology hasn't changed substantially from the early 2000s. A lot of organizations still sheet up learners. We still expect everybody to learn or complete the same learning, despite the fact that there's multiple ways in which people learn. We still expect people to come to learning instead of learning being part of what they do in the flow of work. So we need to start thinking more effectively about how people actually do their learning outside of work. So when they need to do something, either in a hobby or at home, how do they go about that? Is it trial and error? Do people actually check out on Google? How do they actually go about it? How are they learning? They're not going off to a course to change a tap washer. So we've not kept pace with the advances people are seeing in everyday life, whether they like this or not. Facebook knows where you're looking at and sends feeds accordingly. This morning when I got on my car, it actually already had a destination for Anglicaire's head office. It knows where I'm going and when I'm going every day. So, we need to think about that. How are we changing through that process? So we roll on to the next slide, Jevan. The real concept, some people will know what this is. For those that don't, that's a Nokia 6610. For those of us pre-2000, that's what we were using. That is not a smartphone. That is just a phone. Sometimes I'd like to go back to that. But if we don't start to move, to change, we're going to become like the Nokia 6610. It's obsolete. It disappeared. To address the AI disruption, organizations have got to adopt adaptive learning strategies that promote agility, continuous skill development, and responsiveness to the emerging technologies that are coming up and in our faces now. ensuring sustained workforce readiness. Otherwise, like the 6610, we're going to become irrelevant, niche, and or obsolete. So we need to build AI into our learning strategies. We need to do this with foresight and planning. It's not going to just happen. You've actually got to plan for this. We need to understand the human intervention points, the value adds, and the way in which our end users will interact with that learning. So what and how are they actually taking that learning on board? When are they coming to it? How do they want to come to it through that process? Where practical, it needs to be seamless and no different to the way in which they interact with AI in their day-to-day lives. You don't want to create something that's different through that process. However, in the background, it also needs to enable automation that allows for agile adaptation needed to move with the organisational technological changes that are becoming part of our everyday life. So a good example we're grappling with is in our own organisation is career pathways. Managing these manually with the changes to roles and the associated skill development that's required becomes almost impossible without some form of AI intervention. So this brings crossover and collaboration needed between the traditionally separate areas of OD, talent management and learning. And we more and more areas where organisations are going to have to embrace AI and adaptability to move forward to a holistic talent management. And that kind of brings me to the last point on this slide. Learning needs to become something we do because we see the need and or we don't want to miss out. It needs to be compelling, it needs to be relevant, and it needs to deliver outcomes, not outputs. And that's a big challenge for us through that process. We tend to be focused on how many people are going to learning, not actually what they're learning through that process. So I think that's where we can use AI a lot more. So I just want to show just a couple of things that we're doing at Anglia here at the moment. So we slip to the next slide, Javan. In the last year, we've seen Anglia here bring together its suite of learning in a structured academy focused on addressing the key elements required to drive strategic outcomes for the business while enabling individuals to own their own careers and their own development. We're at the early stages of leveraging AI analytics to track learner progress and customize content, ensuring that the training is relevant and engaging and driving the business outcomes we're looking for. But that includes identifying skills required for roles and using AI to develop traditional and alternative career pathways, linking learning to developed skills. That's going to allow individuals to have personalised learning pathways for them to learn at their own pace, while continuous feedback loops provide real-time adjustments to improve skill acquisition. We're actually using AI in that space quite a bit at the moment to actually get some coaching in there around the learning to actually help the learner to actually have some different questions coming to them in an AI tool, asking them questions through that process to actually get that understanding of the learning transfer that's going through. This approach represents a dynamic learner-centered role model that's aligning to the demands of the AI area. So you'll see we've got a lot of different things that we deliver through that process. It provides a wide range of options for development for individuals and creates options for staff to choose a learning methodology that suits their learning style. It's a choose your own adventure process, whether it's face-to-face, online webinars, skills masterclasses, which can be either face-to-face or online, facilitated peer learning or AI chat-based coaching or interactive workshops. At the same time, we've got to manage regulatory compliance. We deal with that every day. And we're moving from the traditional sheep-tip approach to identified personas that deliver required learning for roles in forms that meet organisational requirements and deliver those learning outcomes. It's really thinking about using AI to actually identify what's needed to meet regulatory and legislative requirements at different times. It's early days in our journey to transform, although we have seen significant improvements in business outcomes. with increases in our staff engagement, improvements in our retention, and a significant improvement in our engagement scores around opportunities for development through that process. And pleasingly, the learning and career pathway drivers sit well above the not-for-profit benchmarks in that space. So we're using a few different tools, LinkedIn Learning, skills development, career pathways, and some of that coaching process. We've done a couple of different pilots with AI in coaching. We're using AI in recruitment specifically, and we're currently looking at opportunities and building working groups around AI for building career pathways in our HRIS. We're using Workday with Skills.org and the Workday Journeys. And we're pushing Cornerstone quite heavily around the AI usage in the learning management system. And we're using a few different things like Habit Builder in our leadership development courses, an AI reinforcement tool around the habits that we're trying to develop our leaders through that process. So the Academy employs an adaptive learning model that leverages those AI analytics, personalised learning paths, and continuous feedback loops, aiming to drive and foster agility, engagement, and skill relevance in a fast-changing environment. So I'm going to wrap it up. If we go to the next slide, Siobhan, with 2 quick slides. These are just some key takeaways from my perspective. Learning needs to be holistic. Learning teams need to think of solutions that don't just deliver the 10% of the formal learning, but they actually look at how that learning is actually delivered in that 70 and 20% to be truly effective in the AI era. How can we actually use AI to help through that process? And then learning needs to become part of the everyday life of the worker. Learning is not something that's done to them. It's something they do every day. Everything they do should be a learning opportunity through that process. And we need to, as a learning team, work with the business to help create those learning opportunities through collaboration. Over-engineering is no longer acceptable. 100 slides to get across something that could be done in 5 slides. Giving people a whole pile of learning that they're never going to use or that they don't use until a very later stage. I worked for a large insurance company. We provided some learning that in the very first 3 months of a person's life at that company that they weren't going to use for 18 months. They're never going to remember that stuff. So it's about thinking about when and where they need to do stuff. Identify and use data to inform the decisions, but make sure you're measuring the right things. Often we use data, we measure the wrong things. So what's important for your organisation, you need to understand that. Too much data, graphs and verbiage can create noise that just gets in the way of what you're trying to achieve. So in a final wrap up, to thrive in the AI area, and we'll slip to the next slide, Siobhan. To thrive in the AI era, organisations must rethink their learning strategies. We're trying that with our Anglicare Academy. It's highlighting for us the importance of being adaptive. We're doing test and learns. We've tried some stuff in the last year. We've actually revisited stuff and we've removed stuff. We've actually failed on a few occasions. And my team have got that opportunity. And in fact, they're encouraged to test and learn and fail fast. 2 rules. Don't make the same mistake twice because you haven't learned from it. And don't sell the bank. I used to work for a bank. Don't do something bad enough to ruin our reputation. So other than that, if we're not making mistakes, we're not learning. It's the way you learn to ride a bike. It's the way you learn to drive a car. You've got to be able to have a crack at those things. So that's my piece. Happy for any questions that come through.
Thanks, Michael. I've asked the audience for typing in their questions in the chat box. So there's one question from Pradeep. Can you share data-driven insights you're already using in your organization?
Yeah, so some of it is around the effectiveness of the learning. So some of the stuff we've been able to look at, for example, is we did a whole pile of management capability programs, and we had one particular area in our business voluntold their team leaders, their leaders that they had to enrol. What we've been able to identify from that is it's not the number of enrolments. So we're actually looking at the data coming through in terms of enrolment. It looks really great. We had a over 35% increase in enrolment and learning, and that would be a great story to tell at ELT. But then we actually looked at those people that had actually completed the learning, and we did see an increase, but it wasn't 35%. So it's about looking at that data and understanding what data you're using to make sure you know what you're actually trying to achieve. So from a data-driven perspective, yes, we had great enrolment, but we were actually more interested in the outcomes. How many people had finished, and then you're looking at what the business impact was through from there. Yeah.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you for your presentation. We've got some more questions in the chat, so if you want to answer them through chat, I'm going to pass on the mic to Sandhya. So Sandhya, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. So my name is Sandhya. I'm a general manager at RAC here in Western Australia. RAC stands for Royal Automobile Club. I know we have a lot of experts today following us on this panel. So I thought I would best add value by talking about my organization, the context in which we are trying to, set up ourselves for improving our learning and working with AI. So as far as RAC is concerned, we have been in the business for over 115 years. So we supported car drivers in Western Australia when they were sharing the road with horse carriages. We also put up one of the first road signs in WA, as well as drew up for one of the first maps in Western Australia. So it gives you context on how long we've been around. We currently have about 1.3 million members, which is what we don't call them customers, we call them members because we're a club. We have grown so much that at the moment, 1 in 2 people in Western Australia is probably an RAC member. So we are also one of the most recognized and well-loved brands in Western Australia. So there's a lot of reputation here to hold tight, pretty much like what Michael was saying, which is very dear to us and something that we don't want to mess with. We have a diverse range of businesses we operate in. We've obviously grown a lot since 1906. We not only support our car drivers from a car patrols perspective, but we also offer car insurance, home insurance, auto services, and parks and resorts. We have about 6 parks and resorts in some lovely locations in Western Australia, if you're ever here in the state. But that gives you a little bit more context about the kind of workforce that we're working with, right? A lot of people on the front line, a lot of people in roles which don't have traditional access to a laptop or even a mobile phone during their workday. We have about 2,500 employees. Quality service is something that we are known for, pretty much similar to, I would say, like an Amazon. And more than half our workforce, like I mentioned, are frontline employees. Not sure what happened in that last line there, but I forgot a few words or got missed. But anyway, so our primary purpose is to be safe, sustainable, and connected. That keeps us going, and our strategy is always designed around that. And the image you see on our right is some of the community work we do. So we have a big department that focuses on our community services, and that's a lot of where we pour our money into from our membership. All right, so moving on to the learning topic. Thanks for the next slide. So as an organization, we have been very mindful in how we work with AI. We are anxious because there is still a lot of inaccuracy and bias. So I think these are some things that we've been losing sleep on when we start thinking about how do we conceptualize this learning framework and how do we build it up to service our people. We're also worried about ethical use. So in Western Australia, we have a lot of diversity here, and we want to make sure that however we use it, we don't affect our brand and reputation. So that is always center of mind when we are planning our learning and we're planning the usage of our AI tools. As an organization, when we're talking about investments and investment in AI, this is something we want to do, because if we don't do it, then you lose out and you miss the bus. Right? However, for an organization that's relatively small, where and how do we invest? And we keep getting feedback from studies like this one from, I think it was Harvard, where they're telling us that only about 26% of organizations who are investing in AI are actually getting something back from it. So all these are impacting how we think about our investment and our approach forward with AI. Move to the next slide. So one of the key things that's, I would not say holding us back, but that's making us think and pause a little bit in our AI approach is how are we bringing the whole organization on the journey? So when we have about half our workforce on the front line, we have a significant part of our workforce also in call centers. And as you know, if you ever worked in a call center, your time is very carefully managed. And then we have all these people who are working in our parks and resorts as grounds people, as dishwashers, as chefs. We have our auto services people. They don't have access to AI or laptops or even a mobile phone on a daily, hourly basis. So how do we bring all these people on the journey? So today, we have a pretty relaxed approach to how we use AI in the organization. We have not closed down access to commonly available AI functionality like ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot. They are open. You can use it. We have recommended people using Copilot, which we have we're gatekeeping a little bit because it uses information within RAC. That's our preferred AI tool that we are recommending people use. However, not everyone has access to it, right? Because you are charged an extra fee for each license. So we only currently provide it if a manager approves it. So that leads us to this problem where there's disparity in access to AI. So not everyone has access to it and not everyone knows how to use it. So when this is a situation, how do you bring everyone along the journey? What we found in a study that we did internally was that a lot of people who were using AI were in fact not using it for work purposes. They are using it to search up, health issues, and they're using it to search up other things which are not related to work. So how do you continue to keep that interest and utility of AI while at the same time bringing in some discipline and regulations around it? And how do we culturally shift to allow the use of AI in a valuable way? So those are a couple of things that, that's on our mind. Moving to the next slide. So this is something that the learning teams, and I think for us, for my teams who work on our people frameworks and concepts, we are constantly thinking about this. If you look at this really cool image that comes from Stanford, over the past decade, over the past 8 years, we have had a significant change in how AI has come to meddle or interfere in our lives, right? So they have crossed the limit of human performance. So in the last few years, we've seen that visual reasoning, reading comprehension, English language understanding, the ability to do mathematics and multitask has all increased tremendously. And you all know that if you don't check the internet for a couple of weeks, you feel like you're already left behind because you're now not using Nano Banana or you're not using the latest prompt that everyone else has been using. So in a situation like this, how do you make sure that everyone's reskilled? So at the moment we have, I think it's a 6-month build to actually identify a need for a particular skill or a learning and to build up the content for it and to plan and then launch that particular learning to the rest of the organization. But if you look at this, the accelerated learning cycles mean that you have to constantly be on your toes, quickly identify what's needed and be able to meet that need. And what's leadership looking like in this context, right? How are we building that flexibility and how are we embedding the need for a lifelong learning? And AI is helping us be quicker, but how are we able to think better? So how do we utilize AI to then think better, not only as an individual or a team, but as an organization? So that accelerated learning cycle is really putting us in a pickle about how do we resource for this and how do we plan for this? And in an organization that's not that big or agile, how do we manage this change? Moving on to the next slide, and I'm being a little bit quick so that I can allow a few minutes for questions. For me, this is the most important thing from a learning and AI perspective. Are we losing the human centricity of how we learn? If you're learning everything utilizing AI, so your content is built by AI and you are just consuming it from a screen, how are we encouraging collaboration, mentorship, and experimentation? So I think most of us here have probably learned some really valuable stuff in our lives by collaborating with other people, by working with a mentor, and by failing. So how do we encourage that? And what are we missing when that doesn't happen, right? And what are the human skills that are differentiating us? And where do we pick those up? So if we look at our children or the next generation, these are some of the things that we are hoping they pick up, but we aren't sure that they will pick up that easily in what they are exposed to today. So some of these critical skills being reasoning, judgment, when do you use what, creativity, like how does AI help that creativity, or how does it stop that creativity? And the last one is that amazing combination of utilizing AI and knowing how to utilize AI. So are you able to curate what AI generates in a powerful manner that gives the right messaging? So these are some things that we are thinking of from the perspective of how do we keep going in the presence of AI and in parallel with what AI is offering us. Similar to what Michael said, we are already using AI from our HRIS. We also use Workday. So we've been using a lot of AI functionality that AI offers in the last few years. We are continuing to plan to be on top of that. And a lot of HRIS systems are now offering that functionality. However, from a member-facing perspective, we are moving slower because we are mindful of what kind of impacts that could create from a bias perspective, from a reputation perspective, and ethically, how does it work for us? So those are some things that we have in perspective as we plan for this. The last slide in my pack, which is the next one, is what's next for us at RAC. So we've just put together an ethical AI policy, and we are starting to build kind of a squad around how we use AI here. And we are hoping that's the beginning of a long journey of us learning along with AI. Responsible integration is really looking at all that transparency and fairness that we want to bring to this process. Generative AI and content management, I think we have a few experts that's following me, who are probably going to talk a little bit more about this, but that's something we're very keen to use to help us with that accelerated cycle. Simulation-based training, we have experimented with a little bit of this with our auto services. Obviously, we need to have our auto services people now trained in electric vehicles and all sorts of new things. So we are exploring how we could help that with a simulation-based training, and that would also be helpful for our patrols, our roadside assistants, etc. The last one is co-creation of AI tools. So really from the perspective of bringing everybody along the journey, I think this is really key. How do we involve the rest of our teams and our organization coming together to really co-create these tools? So there's a lot more shift in the culture and a lot more buy-in about what we want to do with AI going forward. All right, so that was me. I hope that was some useful perspective of what the industry is thinking about learning in AI, and hope I've been on time. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Sandhya. We'll just wait for questions to pop in the box if there are any. But in the meantime, a question for you: are you finding the enterprise technology platforms, I guess the HR systems, being a little restrictive and not really up to date with what's kind of happening in the general world of AI through Gemini or ChatGPT? Is there a bit of a disconnect?
There is a lag. I think there is always a little bit of a lag, but organizationally, I'm not sure we are ready to take the full leap anyway. So from a change management and adoption perspective, I feel like we are okay with the pace at which our HRIS is iterating AI improvements. I think a lot of it is also based on the individual culture of an organization. Are we ready, and is this something that we want to sample and use? So for example, we turned on Skills AI in Career Hub a couple of years back, but as an organization, we've gone through so much change that we've really not had the space and the bandwidth to really pick it up and utilize it. So I feel like while I would like to tell the Workdays and the SAPs of the world that you need to be quicker and you need to get on it, as an organization, we're not ready to adopt it. So I just have to wait and watch.
Thank you very much, Sandhya, and I'm sure there'll be some questions which will come through. If you could respond to them, that will be fantastic. So thank you for this wonderful panel, and we will now move on to the next panel of Tracy and Mike, beginning with Tracy. So Tracy, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm so glad that I actually can be joining this panel again. Last year, this time, it was more around like I'm getting into my parental leave. So this is where I revive and come back with the AI acceleration. So I'm Tracy. I'm a L&D practitioner, and I've been working in this industry for 15 years. Interesting enough, I work in the intersection of learning, HR tech, learning tech, and also organization transformation. So over the last 15 years, I would say I'm very, very fortunate. After I graduated with my degree, I started to just take the ride of digital learning acceleration. So basically, we have seen like the whole ride of virtual classroom since COVID. And then now when after parental leave came back, things are moving so accelerated pace into the AI world. But what I'm focusing today, next slide, Jivan, it's more around the discussion that we're going to have with Mai later on. It's more around like what we're using AI to accelerate the velocity, but it's more so important to actually understanding how we measure the values. Because I think at the end, as Michael and also Wendy have been talking about earlier, this is more around like what is the human part of the technology we should use. So what I want to actually ask every single person on the panel, do you know the definition of overclocking? Just show hands, or probably just, okay. Yeah, overclocking. Oh, good, yeah. So the definition of overclocking, it's a very interesting term, because when I look at the brief and work on this topic, it's more around to think about in computing world, the overclocking means forcing a CPU to run beyond the factory limits, basically generate heat and then degrades the hardware. So we are talking about something about we're using AI consciously and responsibly in learning and design, because we really want to let people know we usually, today's world, it's speed up the work, it's important, but it's not speed up the human. So at the end of the day, we are still focusing on head, heart, and hands, how human actually work, and not actually speeding up like everything else that's losing that heart feeling. So one thing I do want to emphasize here is like, we did talk about our fluid ecosystem after I came back, not just the parental leave, we've been talking about learning in the flow of works. But what's that learning in the flow of works means? Not being attention seeking for everybody's. So how we're actually making sure that we still protect our people's attention and understanding how we actually work around their pace and meeting what they are. That's the first things that I would do. Because now it's like when we're looking at our overclocking the L&D process, one thing that we look at is the AD model. The AD model is more around like the analyzing phase. When we're understanding analyzing phase, I always been encouraging people to look at where our peoples as a persona-wise, how they work, what are the key challenges, what they're facing, but also there's so many data in the systems already telling their pain points. Why are we doing another evaluation again for something we already know? How can we actually using those ecosystem very effectively using AI to analyzing it first before we actually talking the conversation again? Because this is what I feel like the AI gives us the biggest power of what we could do with the learning methodologies that we can enhancing it. So the next point in these slides, I would also want to talk about the slot problems. The slot problem is all those administrative tasks. We all know learning management system are not for experiences or learners, it's for administrations. So these are the things that I always challenging myself, and we're still using learning management system everywhere we go, but how effectively we can actually help administrator to take out the work that's called slots, and then making sure they're actually focusing the time to connecting with their audiences, to understanding what they need, and then also presenting the data, which is actually where the system's supposed to giving them meaningful conversation with the development going on forward. So AI, how I see it, it's traditionally accelerating the velocity of learning, but also we need to be mindful where we're going to use it effectively. Even next slide, please. Yeah, so the shift of linear to fluid, as we were saying, that the traditional model is very step-step, it's very rigid, it's how we design learning. We all know the course take months to develop. We got people to review it. And then also it's very event-based, episodic, and how it's actually complete. It's only marking your completion status, but doesn't actually get you to retrieve your knowledge on constantly. The reality we all work, we're using information as it goes, how we're actually using the bots, how we're using ChatGPT, we ask questions. So what the reality we should look at how we design the learning. It's designing learning with better asking question techniques, designing learning how we actually can making sure that we can pick out the roadblocks that help people can move faster in the way of getting the job done and then having a better conversation. So like coaching mechanism, like for example, what we did talking about, consuming some skills and then getting people to discuss it using like all the things that we actually been looking into, conversational training. These are the things that it really matter, and then slow down and ask us to reflect a lot. So that's the things that I think we will need to refocusing again for ourselves. And the next slide, please. So the questions that I always provoke myself to think about when we're using AI, it's also when we actually design differently, it's using the first principle thinking. It's like, if the learning, it's not helping us to change the behavior, what we're doing here can be a slop. So that's what we actually want our audiences today. Even myself, constantly asking myself, if today's learning, for example, we deliver some kind of conversational training with our leaders, and we also design some cybersecurity training with our partners' previous job. What it's actually helped them to do is to make sure, like the cybersecurity training, the partners know they're the card data custodian of the clients. While we're here for the 1.5 hours, it's learning all these technology terminologies they never actually think they will use, but they know when it's the instant happen, they know what the protocol should be. So how you're actually responsible to cybersecurity attack, how you do things like that. Those are the workshops that we think partners' time is valuable as everyone else. But those are the workshops we can't just minimize. It's just saying like, give you a cybersecurity training online, you tick the box, you've done it, and you know how to actually respond to cyber attack. We all know the cyber attack stack. It's frightening, especially in this side of the world. So the changing behaviors we're driving, we're using the example, we're really trying to meet the learners where they are, but also emphasizing their impact. They are very much the guardrail for helping us, the organization, be effectively and also responsibly. Next slide, please. So the next piece I would like to actually share more around is in the world of automated ADDIE model. This is something maybe we can look into detail about each part of ADDIE, how we're using AI next year. But this is something my research really focusing on this year is how we use it responsibly, especially with the predictable AI. So if some of the system data are showing us that's a sign, should we believe 100%, or we still actually need to bring that sign and then data analytics alongside with our SMEs? And that's how we say like the analyzing phase or the design phase involving with our co-designing. It's more around not just the L&D space or the P&C space, people and culture space. It's actually broader. It's the business stakeholders that really popping the problem, the people in the front line, people actually doing the job, what we're trying to solve for them. So that's important first things that we need to learn is to teach people how they learn to adapt to learning, to asking good questions when during these kind of workshops. So we prepare them with the opportunity and psychological safety to actually asking good questions We don't judge, we don't penalize it. You can tell us what you see and we're just dropping those down. And then the most important thing is do this constantly and giving the feedback loop. It's important that we train AI, give them feedback loop, but we didn't actually give a feedback loop enough for our people. So that's very important that we are doing this together, as giving that constant feedback loop to our people, letting them know when we actually can move to the next step. But the other thing is also one thing I've been reading quite a lot recently, the fiction project book. It's talking about what is the constructive fictions, what are the fictions that actually really work for discussion. So these are the things that where you actually pause to reflect, what you actually accelerate to pick it up to get the job done. And then always documenting on what we can do, the minimum things, the top 3 things, the things that we can move into the next step, not like we just stop there. So the other thing, it's very, very genuine, a call out, it's the development now, it's for caring. One thing that probably I'm realizing, I should accelerate a little bit. It's one of the quote I really like. It's Charlie Mungo's once say, it's like, if show me incentive, I show you the outcome. So if our incentive is all about speed in the organization, then our outcome is overload. It's gonna be overcooked. And then if our incentive is about capability, it's our outcome will be growth. So leave that in mind, what we really want our incentive to be, the growth, the capability, the people that we actually care and focusing on them. That's my wrap up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy, very much for your presentation. Some really wonderful points, in there. We'll probably do the discussion at the end if we have time. I suspect we might not, but I'm really now excited to pass it on to Mike. So Mike, over to you.
Yeah, so I'd like to really fly through these first couple of slides because the first couple of presentations did a great job, but this first slide is the one that I think is really, that matters the most, is really, don't really adopt any approaches or tactics or practices without thinking through the objectives. We've been hearing a lot of that in the presentations that came before me. I want to underline that point. It's a really important point. And the second point, we also heard in some of these, and I'll share a little bit more about what I've been seeing and some of the things I've been doing in my own practice, that you really need to design where things are going and what's a high likelihood need in the coming year. Don't try to build for more than 16 or 18 months away. Focus on 12 to 24-month horizons. Don't do anything farther than that. You won't be able to predict it. And then the final thing, and I think that Tracy actually really underlined this point very well just before, is that speed without direction means running fast in circles. You really have to actually have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, then slow down and focus on the things that really matter to your people. Moving forward, just very quickly, the first 3 slides of my presentation are where AI is being sold to us, and we're getting sold a bill of goods. So there's a lot of stuff that people talk about personalized learning, and there are things that are out there that are personalizing learning, but it's not really working very well. There's a lot of talk about integrated learning systems. It's not quite there yet. There are things that are working. There are things that are actually pointing in a direction. Where things will be in about a year's time, there might be some roots here, and you may want to pay attention to this. One of the spots where things are making some pretty good progress are in the metrics space. We've actually been measuring learning by the pound for over 20 years. How many people have been sitting in the seats, how long they spent in the seats, and whether they actually completed the course. Measuring learning by the pound is very interesting if you're actually trying to sell pounds of learning, but that's really not meaningful to the business or us either. But that's actually what we've been reporting on. The more you actually start to switch this, you start to signal something different. Next slide, please. Some of the things that are actually changing in the selling of HI are really in this adaptive space and immersive space. So this is actually starting to make some progress. But again, let the buyer beware. Ask good questions. Look at this very carefully. There are a lot of AI chatbots out there that are really algorithmic, not very, very AI oriented. And there's a lot of risk. You really do have to pay attention to it. And a lot of the analytics and data-driven automation that's out there, they're making good progress, but there's a lot of problems with it as well. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what these limitations really are. There are 6 limitations that you really need to pay attention to what's happening right now. The first is there's a lack of state continuity and memory. A lot of what AI does is good if your context window is very small. The minute you actually have to pay attention to larger sequences and larger amounts of space, not going to work. So that means that you can use it for very small things, or you have to actually think differently about how you actually sequence things together. That doesn't mean you can't use it. It means you have to think differently about how you use it. Similarly, fragmented representations and absence of predictive dynamics. These things are missing from what's out there. We as an industry, we've been dealing with education mostly in the Western tradition for more than 1,000 years on the individual level. And we expect our organizations to actually operate on the collective level. Why are we actually focusing on developing skills toward capabilities that the organization needs? We focus on its skills at the individual level, but we never actually think about group and organizational modeling. This is the same problem that exists in AI as it currently is practiced. And if that's not addressed, this is going to become a bigger and bigger problem, because actually, as the industries start to collapse, because you have more capabilities to actually, new startups can actually move into spaces that they haven't had any sort of resistance to, where you can have an Amazon enter into healthcare space because there are no restrictions to it, then you're going to actually have a different kind of problem in the long run. And that problem is the smaller, more nimbler players are going to actually take advantage of situations that larger companies can't actually respond to. 5 and 6 on where AI is actually falling down tremendously is ethical gaps and safety deficiencies. You can put in policies, and those are important things, and a lot of companies are doing that, but it still doesn't fix the underlying problem that exists inside AI, is that it's very easy to jailbreak. In fact, actually, one of the easiest ways to jailbreak any LLM is to use poetry. If you don't believe me, you can look it up. There are a couple of different articles about how to actually use poetry to break your LLM and actually do things that you shouldn't be able to do. If you don't want to write poetry, I understand it's not for everyone, but sometimes you may actually want to actually pay attention to that. And finally, is what I call the unification gap. We're doing the exact same thing we've did with every kind of learning technology and every technology that we've introduced since the mid-90s. It's a bolt on to a process that we actually are basically doing what Wile E. Coyote did when he goes to the Acme company. He says, I'm going to buy rocket skates. That's wonderful, but he actually goes fast off the cliff. That's not what you want to do. You don't want to go fast off the cliff. You got to think about what you're actually doing. And the things that you're investing in have to make sense. We often invest in the technology before we think about the process. And in fact, actually, what AI is really forcing us to think about is, what if processes were different? How would we do this differently? What are the things that we can safely remove? And how do we remove the slop from our processes? Not expecting that the humans actually do things differently. And this is where I want to kind of pick up on what Tracy was saying, but to really kind of build on that point, where we actually need to redesign what we're doing inside the organization, and how can we use what we're learning here to accelerate larger and bigger impact. A couple more slides, and then I'm going to call it a day. So a man named Roger Martin actually is really well known in the business world as introducing design thinking in business. Yes, the Stanford School comes a little bit before what Roger Martin does, but his points actually are really, on the right-hand side, you'll see a little bit more of the details of the stuff he's actually done. He asks one question that I think is a really important question that we should be doing as learning professionals. What would need to be true? What would have to be true for us to actually do things differently? What do we actually need to understand, and how do we present it that way? Starting from that question, we might actually make some very good headway and progress. Moving forward, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to apply what would have to be true to solving some of these AI problems. So next slide, please. 3 concepts. Concept number 1, continual versus continuous learning. Concept number 2 is individual skills and team performance and capabilities. And number 3 is measuring for business impact. Continual learning. You can feed a machine endless amounts of data, and it will keep updating. You give a human endless amounts of data, they're going to quit. And the problem is our attention span and our ability to handle more and more of this kind of behavior is going down. So we have to actually practice continual learning, which is really where you actually give a space for someone to reflect and reflect back what they're learning. This is actually a really important component part. We've known this since the 70s, but we rarely practice it. We don't put in the second loop and the third loop in learning. But this is a really important component part of what we actually need to think about differently. Similarly, about team performance and capabilities, it's important to think about skill, but it's also important to think more about the capability that that skill is going to be practiced in. What are the processes and tasks that it's being applied in? How do I actually make it a little bit better? And then finally, you got to start by measuring for a business impact. You got to think about what do you actually need to do, and you don't need causal relationships. You need helping someone that's reasonable conclude that more likely than not, the effort that you actually produce, the collective and learning and desired outcome. And that's known as the preponderance of evidence. You don't have to actually show that there is a clear scientific, you'll never be able to do that with learning. And in fact, that's actually one of the biggest problems that we've actually had in the last 35 years of measuring learning. So how do you actually do this? What would have to be true? Take us to the next slide, please, Jevin. So we need to shift away from awareness to readiness. Readiness is going to help us actually think about collective performance. So how do I know that your skill is ready to be applied on the task or the activity that you need to do? And here are some, there's some materials and articles that, I'll provide. These slides are available through Jevin. The quotation that you can't see on the slide there is 40% of workers do not know how to bring AI into their roles. 41% don't even understand how to actually, what do I do with this? How do I actually apply this to my job? And we're just basically giving them another tool that just it's more cognitive noise. And we're basically saying, there you go. Instead, if we start from here's actually some of the things that you can do, and here's a way to actually reduce some of the load that you have, create capacity out of the gate, and with that capacity, help them start to upskill on something that you need them to do more of. That's going to make a bigger difference in the long run. Unfortunately, we spend money on more tools, but we don't actually teach people how to use these tools. So it's not very helpful. Moving forward to the next slide, and really we need to think of L&D as a performance engine. We need to be focusing on powering skills mapping, learning ecosystems, and personalization. These are the places where things are actually starting to change. I've got a couple of goodies here and links that you can take a look at later. And one more slide, I think, Jevin, I'll call it good. This is really how do you reframe around performance analysis, okay? And the way that you would have to actually operate differently. So what would have to be true is you have to actually reframe what's the data that needs to be used to define the success? What's the approach that you need to use to identify the business problem? What's the method that the people need to be part of the effort? Slow down. In fact, actually spending this time to reframe and focus around performance and then actually have an impact, people are going to respond more effectively to it. This is actually how you make a difference. And it really starts really in understanding what you're trying to accomplish and how you need to accomplish it. AI is a powerful tool, and what it's really helping us do, especially generative AI, is we're moving into a new age. With the birth of the internet over 30 years ago, we moved into the knowledge age. Access to information became available to everyone. As we move into the generative AI age, we're moving into the age of wisdom. It's not about knowing what, it's not about knowing how, it's about knowing why and why not. And that's really what you need to help get people at. Now, wisdom doesn't mean that we're actually creating all these wise sages on the hill. We're creating people that apply judgment. That means that you actually just don't press the button like George Jetson and expect everything to come out the other side the way you expect it to. You got to be asking questions. You got to encourage people to question things. You got to encourage that to happen. And that's really the new role of L&D is going to be moving towards performance development. I'll stop here, Jevin, so we actually make up a little bit of time and we can move forward. I have more slides and you can take all these, they'll be made available to everyone.
Mike, thank you.
Thanks.
Let me know when your book's coming out. I'll be the first in the line to buy it. So look, that's what I love talking to you, Mike, is that you're kind of able to synthesize all these disparate things at different levels into such a consistent framework. Look, I think we'll wait for questions in the chat, but Mike, thank you again. That was pretty educational. So I'll move on to the next panel, and we've got, I think a double act, Rob Wilkins and Helena. So over to you, Rob and Helena.
Thank you. Well, I'll kick things off. I'm Helena. I'm one of the co-founders of a career tech platform called Go Figure, and I'm going to caveat and development professional. Nor am I a fortune teller, but part of my role is to run ahead of the challenges that organizations face in terms of future skills, future careers, and find interesting ways to solve people-related problems using technology, which I hope is why I'm here. And I'm going to be really bold and make some predictions. So Rob's going to interject probably as I make predictions that are incorrect. And I'm looking forward to a spicy conversation if you disagree with me. So if we could move to the first slide. Now, this one's a bold one. So by 2030, it's my belief that the learning management system will be the least important learning tool in your organization. Now, how very dare I make this prediction? The reason I believe that I have the right to do this is, amongst my other jobs, I have been working with my team on an algorithm that predicts the impact on skills, jobs, and tasks as a result of AI and automation. And we can already see the clues in the tea leaves here. And I'm really relieved that some of the previous presentations touched upon this. Employees will and are increasingly learning through tools like search, AI assistants, their colleagues, workflow tools embedded in your vendor tech stack, and external learning content. We've already heard many times today that most learning already happens in the flow of work, and increasingly employees will demand that information is at their fingertips rather than them having to go to a third-party tool when they have time, when they have privacy, when their busy schedule allows them to do this. And they'll expect learning where they are, not going to where you want them to learn. I already heard this prediction. I think Tracy made this, that learning management systems will increasingly be relegated to compliance and record keeping, while employees favour tools and experiences that teach them in real time. I want to stop here and just talk about a few things I'm already seeing. We tend to sort of attract future thinking and innovative companies. So some of this is already playing out. So I wanted to take you through some examples of stuff I see happening in the market. I don't know if anyone has tried Google Learn Your Way. And if you haven't tried Google Learn Your Way, Google it. It's a tool that lets you upload a PDF or a textbook, answer some questions about your learning style. So maybe I'm a baseball fan and I need to learn something, but I favour baseball. That's not strictly speaking true. It will rewrite the content of that textbook using baseball analogies. So it delivers learning in a format that I can understand, I'm interested in, and I can appreciate. There's already some surveys that have gone out recently to suggest that Gen Z already trust AI more than they trust their own managers. They're increasingly turning to, they don't have to book an appointment with, and so on. I don't know when the last time was that you learned anything. Yes, Notebook LLM is really, really cool. If you want to ever turn a conversation that you've had into a podcast, for example, go and try that one. That's an insane way of delivering learning. I came across a cinema recently that was trying to think of interesting ways to distribute knowledge. Now, cinema workers, again, think about the conditions of working in a cinema. You don't have a desk. You don't have privacy. You have customers coming to face you. They decided to release their business updates in the form of a podcast so that people could listen to those podcasts on their commute, on the bus, on the way to work. So already it's happening that we're disseminating knowledge using interesting channels that meet people's needs in a more personalised way. We have a client in the UK. They are next level. They're 12,000 people. They don't actually have an HR team. It's pretty nuts. I don't know if something happened to that CEO in the past to make him so sort of anti-HR. We're not even allowed to call ourselves an HR tech platform when we work with this customer. But they've been recently using marketers and people in their organization with social media who have a social media following to create TikTok style learning. They deliver content in snippets of less than 2 minutes. So it's all recorded on a phone. It's all pretty fun. It's all encouraging. But it's used to sort of market the rest of their learning content. It's a short form snippet of information. If the person wants to learn more, they're invited to come into a learning system to deepen their knowledge. And so a phrase that I heard recently that I really, really liked, which is the big shift is from destination learning to ambient learning, happening where the work is. And a few things that we're already having to do to kind of face this new reality is I would hypothesize that our platform won't have a user interface within about 2 years. You won't come to us anymore. You'll chat to us in a Slack or a Microsoft Teams interface. So in terms of what we're doing as a technology company to adapt to changing priorities and how people want to consume information, we're already thinking ahead. And so this is how it's changing the way that we build technology to support career development and learning. Rob, based on our conversation the other day, is there anything you want to challenge me on or interject with here?
No, not at all. And mainly because, and I'll cover off on this a little bit, but CEOs are consistently looking at what in my portfolio of architecture and what am I looking at across the organization, what don't I need anymore? And it's very, very hard to get learning management systems in the age of data and agentic AI to stand up and actually say that they're going to add considerable amounts of value, because essentially they're data gathering mechanisms. Yes, they deliver learning, but you can deliver learning in, as you pointed out quite rightly, in so many other ways now. So no, I totally fundamentally concur.
Awesome. Okay, we'll skip to prediction 2 in the interest of time. I, again, not being a learning and development profession, but coming from the sort of people and talent space, even, decades ago, I was talking about this hyper-personalization. So everyone's talking about personalized learning, but few having the data to do it. I gave a presentation last week on this, actually, about how crazy it is about what a black box work is. So you're probably, if you're in a big organization, sat next to someone who, I don't know, speaks Japanese or used to be a UX designer, but they're now a marketing analyst or something completely crazy. We only know about people in the context that we know them. We spend all of this time interviewing them, and it's like our memory is erased after they start working with us. Most organizations don't have any data on the skills their people currently have. They have from their past lives, or even less of a clue about the skills that they need to develop in the future. We're already seeing a shift towards this. I'm getting some interesting inquiries now from organizations that are putting together their 2026 and beyond roadmap. And the question that they're being asked at the boardroom table is, there's this sort of, we're doing AI, we need to do AI, AI is coming. What do we need to be building in the ways of skills, capabilities, and talents in order to leverage this? So the future ready organizations that we're working with do treat skills and things like task intelligence as a core asset. And task intelligence is forgetting so much what the job title is and focusing more on the work that the person's doing and treating that as an asset. Your human capital asset for most companies is the most expensive and precious asset that we know. So going back to my earlier point, the fact that it's such a black box, that boggles my mind. So it's possible now through technology to build a living, breathing, dynamic picture of the skills that you have in the organization. And it's even now becoming possible to look into the future at the skills that you're going to need to develop and what will change as a result of AI nibbling into people's works. And before I move on to Rob, the model that we built, I don't know if this scares you or excites you. There is no single white collar job that we found is untouchable by AI, whether that tasks shifting to being augmented by AI, so your Microsoft Copilot type of tasks where the AI does it a little bit better, but the human still initiates the work, or whether it's tasks being fully automated or even eradicated. The types of information that I expect that you're going to be asked as you prepare your 2026 strategies and beyond is, what does that mean? What do we need to be building and what do we do about it? But it is possible. It's not necessarily easy, but with the right mindset, with the right tools, with the right incentives, that's important. It is possible to start building up that dynamic data set so that you can achieve this miracle of hyper-personalized learning. Rob, I'll pass on to you. Do feel free to challenge me, and I'll keep an eye on the questions here.
No, and I like what you're saying there. I think the aspect of hyper-personalized learning in a lot of ways can be solved, and I sort of put something in the chat room about it, because the reality is we don't collect the data we need. And if we collected the data we needed, so for instance, imagine a system, running on Agentic AI where we say we need to hire for a position type, and all of a sudden the position type says, okay, is there anything we need to update from a task intelligence perspective? What does that actually look like? And then when the person starts in the organization, can we capture their disposition for learning? Do they prefer to learn with people? Do they prefer to learn online? Do they prefer to learn in a really personalized fashion on their own, on mobile devices or within? We don't capture that data, yet we've got the opportunity to be able to do it as part of their employment. And this is where we've let ourselves down incredibly, both HR and L&D, in the past, and I bang on about data for many, many years now. And this is the point, is that you need to ask yourself the question, what data do you need? And then when you know what data you do need, you're going to do a much, much better job, because you're going to be making informed practice, and you're going to be able to apply that in a way that the organization hasn't even thought of. And then you can apply it back to a lot of your return on investment. So, yeah, that's my view on that. We'll move on to the next slide. And this is where I'll kick in. For those of you who may not know me, I have held executive roles in learning and development, and recently as a deputy CIO and head of information services in the IT sectors for a lot of the organizations that I've worked in. And a lot of what I do now in my own company is take a look at, what are the issues that I'm faced with, and what are the issues that my clients are faced with. And in talking to a number of CEOs lately, I think what we're faced with right now, and Helena has touched on this, AI is not going to stop. It's not going to be kind. It will be, something that we can celebrate, but at the end of the day, it's up to us in terms of the way that we use it. But we've got to develop foresight to teach the work that people will be doing. Forget about what they're doing now, and forget about what they're doing. You've got mechanisms, not that they're really, really good, to measure what people are doing now and how they're doing it and what they're doing it. But AI is going to reshape the task mix in every single job that you've got within an organization, and it evolves faster than most functions can keep up. L&D needs the foresight. I've got that little cut there, which is the recent global layoffs by organizations, most of them US based, but it's just a little snapshot, right? And we're up over 100,000 people that have been laid off. Most of that is in the IT area. And when I start to actually look at IT, I've been working in the last 12 to 18 months as SISO as a service, as a virtual CIO. And what is it? Why am I working in that? Because the organizations have basically said, we're better off having that as a service, because the difference between what it costs us to actually have the fixed costs of salary, the fixed costs of teams, the fixed costs of this, as opposed to using a service where they're working with multiple clients, possibly multiple clients within that industry, and I can actually execute against all that expertise. Now, that's not to say that organizations are doing it really, really well, the ones that do provide it, but have you thought about L&D as a service? L&D as a service is something that happens in the US. Mike would know that, and there are organizations there that do it. And for me, the big thing there as service providers, and you start to look at them, think people like Capita and IIT and a lot of the others, is that they're starting to get so comprehensive and getting footholds and footprints across so many industries that the question's got to be asked, what are you providing as an internal L&D team that cannot be provided as a service? That's where AI, I think, for those organizations that can invest in it and start to actually produce these as a service models, they can actually start to integrate with IT's areas, start to actually understand what it's going to be needed to be able to pump that in. And then all of a sudden, things like the learning management system, we don't really need it, because we can actually capture the reading of a PDF, the viewing of a video. We can actually take the old tin can model and wrap some sort of wrapper around it and be able to actually say, whenever anybody's touching this, they're also touching a learning object. And then Agentic AI can actually put that data into huge database that you can actually start to work with and do that. People like Korn Ferry, they're really starting to look at this really, really hard. So we're not going to escape is the big thing. And that's why we've made this prediction. I do not believe that there is not a CEO on this earth that wouldn't start looking at the as a service options that are available to them and start doing the cost comparisons to actually see whether it's a better option. So it's not so much about what we do, how we do it, or anything else along those lines. It's about, can anybody else do it quicker, cheaper, faster, and with just as much impact as we've got? So that's something to consider. Helena, any comments?
No, I just put a bit of a kind of like joke in the chat though. In terms of the future skills that we need to be developing in organizations, guess what the most in-demand AI skill in Australia is right now? AI. It's literally AI. It just blows my mind that that's just not going to help anyone. Anyway.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Which doesn't help. And this is it. But when you actually go down the which I think is a core separation that L&D needs to focus on, is the difference between generative AI and RAG. And we start to actually understand what those fundamental principal differences are and what RAG can actually do for us: retrieval, augmentation, grounding. Once we start to actually understand that, that's where working in CISO as a service and virtual CIO, and I'm working with a small to medium enterprise L&D teams at the moment, but what I've been working on them with is, so how do you actually reposition yourself in terms of the way that you actually want to do this? And I have one client who's fundamentally thinking about ditching their LMS as a service and developing their own piece, because they've got a young graduate who's come out, who's the son of one of the people working within the business, who has just gobbled up AI and loves it, and neurodivergent. He's a bit autistic, but he's just developing these tools where they're going, well, hang on a second, we've got 200 employees, but we can dish up learning here, by putting it into an interface, doing what we need to be able to do it, and have that RAG indicator in the background that's picking everything up and actually building the LLM out as large as it needs to be. So this is a big one. It's not going to leave your job untouched or the L&D function untouched. I think the biggest risk, though, is where a CEO looks at it and says, costs compared, am I going to get more value out of it as a service, or am I going to get more value as keeping the people that I've got at the moment? And that's where we need to be on our toes. Next slide, please, Jeevan. Okay, this one is a practice for me that says, and people who know me and know me very, very well will know that for the last 10 years, I've been talking about an integral part of your learning and development team is not one now, I'm going to say a team of data analysts that can absolutely, within an inch of its life, look at data across the business. And I mean the entirety of the business. It's about being able to actually say to ourselves, for everything that we've got, have we got a data practice that supports the approach that we want to actually take from a learning and development perspective? Have we shifted from building courses to establish a data practice and enable the curation of tools and content that powers the adaptive learning systems that we want? Have we got the data that actually underpins why we're taking the focus that we've got? Have we got something agentic that's actually going to build online learning for us, but they can actually use the data that we've collected and the way the importance of the data that we've collected to enable that shift? L&D can become the organization's knowledge engine because it can actually combine all the data on skill and capability with all the business data. And the moment that you get that, you can then baseline measure. You can get two control groups. One control group that is doing things the way that they've always done it, another control group that is actually doing what they're being educated on, which is the new program that you're wanting to put in. And then you've got this data isolation where you can systematically isolate the financial impact. And what I come back to here is, if productivity increased in that group by 10%, what percentage of that increase can be attributed to the learning, and what's new equipment, new products, new changes, product improvement? But the whole point is, you can actually take the business data and start to apply that back against what we can do. It's a more practical way of using Philips or Kirkpatrick or what we always come to know, but it's about using the data. It's about really embedding yourself within the data. And somebody mentioned before that you don't want to be overwhelmed by the data. Well, you won't be. You don't need to be overwhelmed by the data. You will have human in the loop. You will have a way of being both ethically and with efficacy, being able to actually check the data that you're using and being able to actually come back to it and say to yourself, what does that look like in terms of me being able to actually build something here where I can isolate it, show it, prove its value, and then convert it to value. And then when I convert it to value, I can convert the isolated improvements and put it across the organization. And I can actually start to talk to the CEO in terms of the monetary value. I will go not even out on a limb. I'll just tell you from my own experience. When I talk to a CEO or a CFO, we don't talk instructional design. We do not talk facilitation. We do not talk behaviors. We do not talk anything else. We talk two things. Is it a business driver or is it saving costs? That's it. And so with any program of work that I might be doing for them, you know, they're going to ask me to be able to actually prove up that it's actually going to increase or it's going to decrease. That's it. They really, really don't care about anything else. And I wish that they did, because I think there's a lot more that goes to actually contributions to culture. And I'll get into a whole wide variety of things that I don't really want to get into. But I think here that L&D, the prediction here is that done well, they can create the causal link data framework for the organization that starts to actually show what it means to shift people from here to here and actually start to fundamentally show the difference that it is doing. And I'll sort of wind up on the fact that, you know, I had this conversation with Jeevan the other day, but I remember working in Aussie Home Loans as the head of learning and development. And John Simon asked me on my second day, how do I know that I'm getting any bloody value out of learning and development? And I said to him, imagine a value proposition that said, come to Aussie as a new broker and we won't train you. Just a really, really simple thing. John said it was one of the best answers he'd ever received in his life, more so because he said, at least I know I have to train. Now, how do I get the best value out of what it is that I've actually got to train and how people learn? That's a different question. And that's something that I think we've got to get back to. And we've got to establish it now with AI, because AI gives you the opportunity with the business and your data team in learning and development to be able to actually bring all of this together. Helena, I'll let you have a final comment if you think there's anything that I've banged on about.
I'm aligned with you, Rob, and I really enjoy listening to you speak. Just some things that we're seeing out there in the wild. Definitely this focus on ROI. I'm a vendor. I'm one of the people, Mike, you know, the buyer beware type of people that Mike was talking about before. I am asked incessantly about ROI on the platform, and this is very meta. I spent hours in Claude the other day using AI to try and build an ROI calculator. Claude's like insane for that as well. But we're also seeing some shifts in hybrid L&D roles. So that client I was mentioning before, he doesn't have an HR team, also doesn't have a fully dedicated learning team. They are hybrid people. So they co-report into like a COE, and they have 75% of their role is on the job, and then 25% is delivering learning. But they're increasingly hiring technologists to you have a mixture of technologists, AI data specialists, and on-the-job people, because it's easier for her to upskill business people and use AI to turn their knowledge into learning content than it is to justify hiring a central learning team. And I'm sorry if that scares people on the call, but that's the way that you know, I'm seeing clients being pressured into sort of showing good ROI on their investments. So just echo what you said. And then I put in the chat a really cool future of learning job that I found. I mean, it's Microsoft, right? They've got unlimited budget, but this speaks to this whole kind of curation role. The job now is to create learning content that can be consumed by an LLM rather than for an LMS. And it made me wonder if Microsoft is now not just training humans, it's actually probably using the content to train its own agentic AI workforce. But that could need to be me reading into things too much. But I thought that was really interesting.
Absolutely. So yeah, look, in wrapping it up, it's about the fact that you know, it's not about being scary. It's just being absolutely responsive to what it is that we know is coming. And I look back to the last omnibus. I look back to what I was doing with clients at the beginning of the year and what I'm doing with clients at the end of the year. And I'm doing something completely different at the moment with a couple of clients. And I just look at that thinking to myself, I'm lucky in the way that I'm doing that, particularly with the L&D teams that I've worked with. We've been able to actually sit down and do a lot of work. And I don't do a lot of work with them. I do 2 or 3 days work where it's all pretty much getting them in the focus of, okay, what is it that you're really going to need to focus on? And sometimes I think if we did an internal 360 on what our clients thought of us as an L&D function within the organization, but ask the things that matter, not the typical things, you know, and focused on things like AI and other bits and pieces, we might find out a lot more too. So you don't know what you don't know, I think, is the classic example of what people have been able to espouse to me. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Jeevan.
Thanks very much, Rob. Geez, that was a great discussion. Great format, by the way, both of you. Congratulations for coming up with the idea. Obviously, it was great. I loved it. So, hey, thanks. Please continue the discussion with Rob. And now the high standards that have been set by the previous presenters, I'll try and present my stuff. I'll keep it brief so that we've got some time at the end. But essentially, this is what I did for this presentation. I took the new report, which, by the way, is excellent, our Gen AI transition report by the Government of Australia. It is a 125-page small text report, really dense with information. I took it, I loaded into Notebook LM, right? And with the Notebook LM, I was able to basically produce podcasts, 2 podcasts, one a critical podcast, the other one a podcast that did a SWOT analysis of the report. I was able to, generate infographics, as you can see. It's starting to do a pretty good job of I just said, prepare an infographic on this particular stat. It did that. It produced a slide deck, with graphics and everything. It produced a mind map, and I'll send you the link so that you can go and see all these results yourself. It produced quizzes. It produced animated videos, which you can see on the link. The point being that I was able to do this in 20 minutes with a $30 per month Gemini Pro subscription. So if you compare this with a traditional, ADDIE process, you can already see that some of the components of the analysis, design development that we spend a lot of time on, we've got some really core expertise that the Gen AI platforms are starting to become, pretty good. If I had spent more time making my prompts very specific and then running iterations of the prompt, I probably could have got a pretty decent output. So I think this is just an example of, the direction and the speed at which Gen AI, and now combined with agentic AI, might be able to do some of the stuff that we which are our core skills, right? So with that in mind, I've got 3 signposts in this, moving forward. And this really, as we were discussing in the chat, it's really difficult to actually keep up with what's happening in AI. Ansh made a point about specializing in one platform. I tend to specialize in Gemini just because I've got only $30 to spend per month on AI. But the reality is that there are different platforms that do different parts of the ADDIE better, right? So you have to use multiple platforms, Perplexity, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT. So you need to be across all because their capability and ability does change, but at different times. So the 3 things I want to discuss today is the hyper-personalization of learning. We've covered that by some of the previous speakers. The second one is the disintermediation of L&D. So this is where I was a little bit, looked at the stats about what's going to happen in 2026, the survey stat. And I think this is something that we might have to face in the next couple of years. And lastly is the expectation of L&D to use AI to reduce cost and delivery time, just like we expect every other function to do, right? So the first one, the example I gave you is that the Notebook LLM, example that I gave you, and I'm going to send you the link very soon. In fact, I'll put it in now. But essentially, you can see that I am, as a user, starting to put together a collection of tools and features within GenAI to produce my own learning ecosystem, right? And to Rob's point about data not being available for, or Helena's point about not being available for hyper-personalization, I think that the reality is that I know my own data for myself to build my own personal ecosystem. I'm happy to give access to Google LLM to my own documents, to my own spreadsheets for it to kind of know me better in order to hyper-personalize my own learning, and then kind of add agentic AI to automate, etc. So this probably won't happen to me as an employee in an organization, because I really don't want to give up my personal data for personalization. So there's always this balance or this tension between how much data should I give to organizations so they can actually personalize and the learning to my needs. So we'll probably never reach the perfect, because we'll have this tension. But you can see that you can start to build at an individual level the hyper-personalization of learning. And I suspect, like it's always happening, is that employees will start doing that using endorsed and unendorsed tools to build their own learning ecosystem, right? And these platforms are becoming very, very smart and very, very accessible for us to do that. Just visit that link I gave you, and you can chat and with the resource there. So I think that's going to happen more and more. They'll start using GenAI tools to do their own personalized learning ecosystem, which leads to the second point, is that raises the possibility of the disintermediation of L&D, right? What we've done traditionally in L&D is started with kind of face-to-face training, and then kind of moved on to online learning, where I think our core expertise becoming kind of curating knowledge, synthesizing knowledge, making them into nice chunks to learn, add some visual interaction, design, and then churn out a course. That's what GenAI is pretty good at, provided it can be given the right material and the right prompts, right? So I think we have to examine the very core set of skills that we have been using for a long time. Basically, our identity is based on that. I think it is probably an opportunity for us to re-examine and reconstruct our core skills, right? So one thing that we need to be careful is that, because of, I guess, the legacy that we have, it's unlikely we're going to be told that our core skills are at danger of becoming obsolete very quickly, right? Because we live in a bubble. We kind of talk to L&D thought leaders, who obviously live in their own world and have a core skill to espouse. So I think we just need to be careful about watching things coming from sideways. So I think we should actively seek and discard some of our current core skills and gain AI augmented skill to reconstruct our own value add, post-AI in the post-AI adoption world. And that leads me to the third point, is because if we don't do that, really is that what is our value proposition? What is our value add to a business? Because businesses and learners have the same access to Gen AI that we have, or sometimes more. They are closer to the resources that are required to give context to Gen AI prompts. So you could see, and I've already seen this happening in organizations where they've started basically using Gen AI tools to start building their own learning resources, partly because learning resources through the LN team is not easily accessible or can be expensive. So I've started seeing that the self-use of these tools to build a learning resource is starting to happen more. So I think going forward, and actually to bring Mike's point, is to kind of recognize, what is our strength, what is the value that we bring to it, and it is context, right? It is that wisdom, it is that ability to examine the outputs from a Gen AI to critically then re-engineer the prompt to get the exact learning resource that we want, or find holes in what Gen AI has done. So I think that is likely to become the core skill, which means that we need to get closer to what the business is, what it does, how it does it, what our learners are, and how do they do. So the one size fit all, I think, might not work for a long time. So 3 points, it's a little bit dystopian, I guess, and I hope it is not, but I'm kind of stretching the boundaries on more on the negative side, I guess, so that, if it doesn't, so that it doesn't come as a surprise. So moving on, is one of the articles which came out for Harvard recently, and this is just illustrating my point, that at the bottom left-hand corner is the no regrets, where AI does all the loop. Look at what they've identified: summarizing documents, screening resumes, in which AI can do a lot of the loop. And my contention is that a lot of the stuff that we do falls in that quadrant, which is no regrets. And it is time for us to move into quality control and the creative catalyst, right? Which means a change of our skills, core skill sets. That becomes a core skill set, and not, the core ADDIE skill sets. Hopefully, we can do the human first, but I think we probably need to move to the adjoining quadrants before we can move to the top quadrants, because that's a fair leap. So, in summary, what we are talking about is, on the right-hand side of the slide, is from organizing content and courses to orchestrator of learning. And what that means is you're kind of building an ecosystem or helping businesses, the business and the learners, understand and what are the different resources available to them outside of the L&D, inside and also outside of the L&D silo. It doesn't matter where learning comes from or who does it. It's available, and that potentially was the original idea of content curation, which kind of lost its purpose a little bit in the way that it was implemented. But the one thing we can do now is start getting our learning content tagged for better use by AI. So we've got some of the best endorsed and the best structured resources sitting within our LMSs, within our workbooks, but is not structured well enough for AI to use it effectively. So this is our value add when we go to our bosses and the budget approval and say, hey, what we're going to do is we're actually going to start preparing the content and the resources that we have for more effective use by AI, so that it is not garbage in, garbage out for Gen AI when it is used. Secondly is the back to face-to-face learning. So if Notebook LLM is able to produce animations and videos and quizzes, where does our value add, where do we need to refocus? And I think it is going to be back to face-to-face, because that is kind of irreplaceable by AI at the moment, especially where, you kind of require classroom learning for building confidence, for motivating people, for synthesizing information in teams, etc. So I think there will be a move back to facilitation, and the same way, kind of a little bit more in coaching, counseling. Lastly, just need to be aware that our current methods will morph to use AI. In fact, it might be beaten out of shape once we start using AI and start embedding it. And I'm sure something will come out, but it may not be the shape and form that we see now. So I think it is time for us to actually become context experts and not necessarily content experts. I think that'll be done by Gen AI. It does it pretty well. So if anybody remembers, this Learning Cafe framework that we had in 2018 that we put together, we need to re-examine this. It might potentially, and we'll do this in 2026, might potentially change the way it looks, but certainly there will be bits of that which will, require AI augmentation. So that's all, I had to say. Just need to make sure that we kind of recognize that it is a kind of huge change, and we see that by our own use of Gen AI. Not all of it is good quality. Not all of it is, there is hallucinations. That's where L&D can come in, is actually get AI to reduce the hallucination by providing context, by providing structure, by providing guardrails. So I think would be interested to get any questions from you on this side, but I'm very pleased to now hand it over to Catherine, because if Rob and Helena and Mike and everybody is kind of saying that there is going to be a big change in either our careers or our skill sets.
Thank you. I forgot that I had the mute button on. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Catherine Heilemann, and I run a company. I've actually got two labels, but the main one is called The Salary Coach. So I'm all about helping people stand up for themselves in their career and get out of their career what they want. But I also have a very deep experience in learning and development, HR, skills and talent, which goes back for a wee while. I won't tell you how long. You can look me up on LinkedIn. Am I in control of the slides, Giovanna, or are you?
I'll run it for you.
Okay, do you want to flick over to the next one, please? So what I really wanted to talk to you about today is about how you can, we've talked, so I heard Rob, Helena, and also you, Javan, talking about, you know, the re-engineering and all of the stuff about AI, but what do you do for yourself? And what I believe you can do for yourself is you can re-engineer yourself and look to the future in a different way. Helena, I think you put a comment in earlier that year on year entry-level jobs are decreasing. So we've got an inverted sort of triangle, and of course we've got an aging population. So there's a big bubble of people who will exit the workforce in due course. So I think there'll be some sort of balancing out. But I think that what AI is going to do is create parity. And that is that, you know, it will create the learning, it'll do some of the thought leadership as it learns better what to do, and I play with it all the time with the stuff that I'm doing. But what it can't be is you. Yes, you've got context, but you've got the thinking. And I was just doing this earlier today with AI, talking to it about this proposal, and I said, and what about that? And I went, oh, yes. Yes, what it will. And then it made meaning of what I was trying to say. So you, your brain, your experience is what will hold you in good stead for the future. And I don't think that AI will have the same level of creativity and innovation that humans have, because let's face it, AI has been created by humans. So it marches to the beat of the human drum, but it does make life a lot simpler for a lot of what we're doing. Importantly for this is your brand. What do you want to be known for? And what do you want people to be saying about you when you're not in the room? So the workplace is far more competitive than it used to be because of things like AI. And it means that you really will have to work to stand out differently from the rest of the pack. And that requires different thinking and different being, and really operating like a politician. You should never stop campaigning in relation to who you are, what you stand for. And Rob, you talked about how people are interested in value. They want to know what the bottom line is. Yes, they do, and how that translates to you is what is your bottom line value and why are you going to be so valuable for workplaces going forward? Next slide, please. And I'm going to try and make this super fast. So your next career upgrade, and I think it's probably fairly clear to everyone that we have to be upgrading ourselves all the time to remain a part of the game that's in play today, is with curiosity. So being curious about what you're seeing. And Rob, you also mentioned before when you were talking about the learning, you said it's not about behavior, but actually in terms of your career and your brand, it is absolutely about your behavior. So how you show up and how do you demonstrate your expertise? How do you experiment? How do you make yourself visible in the crowd? And that starts to create your brand. So it's less about the learning content, more about you. Jivan, next slide, please. And you want to be reinforced, so you've got to be reinforcing your identity. I'm wondering, and this is, I love this image because it talks about standing out in the crowd in a different way. And I think it's fair to say if you've been around for a wee while, you would have seen a change in the workplace in terms of how people actually physically show up at work. There is a far greater acceptance of diversity. You hear about neurodivergent people. Not that I think we should be labeling them that, but it is actually those, people who are neurodivergent are a very real part of our workplace and very valuable. But our workplaces are becoming more and more inclusive. And in doing that, it also starts to create a bit more competition for mainstream workers, because we will see people who've got pink hair. We will see people showing up differently because we are accepting them for the whole person that they are. So I truly believe that for you to stand out, you really must be bold about it and be proud of the achievements that you have in your portfolio. Pride is not about boasting. It's not about being arrogant and obnoxious, but it is about making sure people understand. And your example, Rob, before with your conversation with John Simon, he will remember you for your one-liner forever. That's about colouring yourself boldly and standing out from the rest. So what is it that you want to do to be like Rob with John Simon? Next slide, please. The main piece around my presentation today is, where can your skills take you? So there are a number of adjacent career paths that people are already diving into. So the change management market is flooded, absolutely flooded with people at the moment. Not only is it a lean time for work in that environment, but there are a lot of people already transitioning into change management. So that's one of your adjacent skills. Coaching and facilitation as well. Capability workforce planning, so people related areas that you as an L&D professional are very well placed to move into. And I'm wondering if those of you who are on the call could maybe pop into the chat box, what areas are you thinking about moving into? Let's do a quick survey. Project management, yep. Diversity, yes, absolutely. What else? Yep, learning technology, absolutely. That's totally in line with what Rob was talking about, yeah. So fanning out with the employee experience, yep. Have any of you thought about any other kinds of areas that are beyond that? Thanks, Mike. Mouse click, please, Javan. Here are some emerging areas that you may want to consider. So the data analytics, and again, Rob, I came onto the session and you were dropping all of these pearls around data insights and so on and so forth. Absolutely, behavioral insights and people analytics is an area that is evolving. All of that information needs to be dealt with in some way. So there is a potential pathway there. We've already heard about learning content curation with AI, so driving the bus. Human-centered transformation lead. So the beauty of AI is that it really does make things easier. You can have a conversation, et cetera, and get something done. And it kind of makes us a bit lazy. Also, though, with automation and the world of social media and platforms and immediate communication, is that there is a decline in the human-centered approach. There is absolutely a big need for culture. There is a big need for organizations to remain human-centered and to emphasize that, because AI and tech dehumanizes in many ways. People can hide behind the chat box. You can snark about people behind their backs, et cetera. All of that stuff happens every day in organizations. But human-centered transformation leads are desperately needed. We've got a world with rising cases around bullying and so on and so forth in the workplace. So if you're inclined to that kind of direction, I would strongly recommend it, exploring it. Experience design. So one of the things that I notice about AI is it doesn't easily yet today take into consideration a customer journey. And actually, I find that a lot in my coaching. We are becoming quite narrowly focused, and this whole breadth of the life cycle of something is being lost. So people end up doing question, answer, short, sharp, and furious. And the experience can get lost in that. And the questions that people might be asking of a system, of learning, of whatever, are not being asked because we're starting to rely on AI and just trying to get stuff done really fast to keep up with the pace. So experience design is very important. Talent, storytelling, and brand narration, there's always a need for beautiful narration. And putting influence and flavor in there to make yourself stand out and make the work stand out in the work environment. And also I've got in there performance coach and mindset consultant. So mark my words, people are having challenges within themselves around their mindset. And all sorts of dynamics exist in the workplace that are being amplified with the advent of technology. And people, there is a swing that I'm seeing in organizations towards learned helplessness, which if you've been around as long as I have been, you will know where that comes from. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, Seligman's work, but mindset. So people are experiencing difficulties in their life, their workplace. There's no separation between home and work. Well, there's less separation these days. And that mindset piece is really useful. It ties into culture, customer experience. It's all interrelated. Next slide, Javan, please. So I wanted to ask you to do a moment of reflection. And it's reconnecting, if you have stopped connecting, with your dreams for yourself when you were growing up, or even when you were earlier on in your career. So what is it that you, and you don't have to put this in chat, this is very personal, but what did you love before your career chose you? And maybe you chose your own career, but maybe you just landed in it and went, oh, I quite like this. It's okay. What talents have you hidden for years? So you may be really great at something, but there's been no call for it and you haven't used it. So what is it that you might be hiding that you might want to bring out? And also, what is it that people have told you you're good at? These are three really powerful questions to ask yourself as you think about where to next for you and what you want for yourself. Rob, you put a comment in there around the need to cut through with senior leaders, ensure they understand the value in terms of the dollars, but the biggest challenge, that they face. So AI will help you in your journey, but it can't do what a human can do. Helena, with your background in HR, you would know this, and all of the candidate work that you did with Randstad, I think it was Randstad I saw in your profile, that AI can't do. And if you're prompting it to have a conversation, it's far harder. Quite honestly, it's quite hard. So thanks, Ange. Any questions? We're 3 minutes before. I've sped through that, I know. I'd normally take a bit more time. Over to you, Jivan.
Thanks, Catherine. Look, any questions, please feel free to hang around. and have a chat after this. But we are close to finish. Look, I'm really impressed with the panelists. I don't know, how you managed to pack all this information and knowledge and insights into such compact packages. It just means that you know your stuff and you worked hard, and you kind of surface the important points all for us. So I think it was I think I really enjoyed the mix of the different sessions and the speakers, but I think the message is kind of consistent that 2026 is going to be very interesting, a very interesting journey. Yeah, not sure what the destination is, whether it'll be good or bad, but at least the journey will be interesting. So looking forward to 2026, and we certainly do have a lot of things happening in Learning Cafe. So we're kind of reviving Learning Cafe and next year, and there's some exciting things coming. So keep in track. But I would like to thank all the panelists. I've also enjoyed the chat that's been happening. And what we'll do is a promise is that we're going to use the recording from this webinar, use the chat, use AI to kind of synthesize and summarize that, put proper guardrails, make sure the prompts are accurate, and send you all those resources. And I think what will be interesting is to see what are the insights that AI picked that we haven't been able to, because we've kind of presented our piece, so it'll do the synthesis for us. So thank you very much. And if we kind of don't talk again, have a wonderful Christmas break, and we will see you in 2026. Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, was that Rob? Some interesting